I am so excited to have this conversation because if you've listened to all of my podcasts, you know that I don't have a lot of conversations with the male perspective. So today we have Avi. He's a psychotherapist from Boulder, Colorado, which I'm so jealous about. We're going to be chatting about emotions and hearing the male perspective on that. We're going to be talking about conditioning around emotions and expressing and feeling our emotions. So super excited to have this conversation with you. Thank you for coming on. You know that I love handing the reins over to my guests to introduce themselves, because who better to introduce yourself than you? So who is Avi? How would you introduce yourself to somebody that has never met you before? That's a big ask.
Wow. Thank you, Hannah. Well, first, thank you for having me on this podcast. I'm super excited. Let's see. Yeah, I would introduce myself as Avi, although my mother would prefer that I introduce myself as Avi-Natan. Um, but let's see. I am a husband, father, psychotherapist, and friend, and brother.
Hmm.
In no particular order after husband
Yeah.
and father. Um, I think I am a feeler, and I am a listener. And
Mm.
I think those are the two qualities that really make me feel most me.
Wow.
That's Abby. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That was maybe one of my favorite intros. That was beautiful. For listeners, because I'm really excited about this aspect too. You don't know about human design, correct?
Not
We
really.
talked.
I have a friend who it's her birthday today. So shout out to Ashley Pearl. Happy
Oh,
birthday. And she mentioned human design about a year ago.
okay.
Um, but yeah, not too in depth is my knowledge on human design yet.
Okay. I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. I like to just share that information too, because honestly, why I do it is because if I'm listening to a podcast and I know someone's human design, it
Mm,
helps me learn about that human design profile as I'm listening to the conversation. And you get
mm.
to learn someone a little bit more. So, for those of you that have some knowledge on human design, Avi is a 3/6 projector. You have a G center authority, which is what we're going to probably end up chatting about at the end. It's also called the sounding board intuition. So, all of those things might mean nothing to you, they might mean something to listeners. You know my human design. I'm a 1/3 manifesting generator, sacral authority. So, that's what we're going to go with for now. We're going to just table that and then come back to human design at the end. So, introduction out of the way, let's dive into chatting. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you specifically because I've had a few really great relationships with therapists in the past. I've gone to therapy, I've always had great relationships with my therapist. But one of my good friends is also a psychotherapist. So we always had conversations about like the connection between coaching and therapy and how they differ, how they're similar. And then just you in general, you share such beautiful information on your social media reels and just opening up conversations. So one of the reasons that I wanted to have this conversation was because specifically you posted this reel and all of your backgrounds are so beautiful right now. You're always like walking through the snow or like hiking. I love the visuals that you do in your reels. I was like, wow, it is still snowing in Colorado. Okay. um, but you posted this reel about, I think it was your son crying, right? And just opening a conversation with your son about how to express your emotions, that it's okay to cry. And I would assume that you have a lot of those conversations with your clients as well, specifically referring to your male clients.
Yeah.
But before we even get into your son and your family and your clients, I'm curious. I'm always curious to like why are you interested? Like what got you into psychotherapy? What got you into specifically the content that you post is a lot of feeling your emotions, moving, allowing the emotions to move through you. So I'm curious to hear your background and why is that important for you to share to the world?
Yeah, great question.
Mhm.
Um, Gee, I mean, I won't say that I always knew I wanted to be a therapist because I didn't.
Okay.
When I, started my undergrad, I was going into wildlife conservation. I wanted to move to Africa and I wanted to work with lions, and that was all, I mean, primarily because of The Lion King and watching that at an early age and connecting so deeply with it.
I love this.
Um, but then I think, I took like an intro psych class my freshman year, and I was like, oh, yeah, it's the internal landscape. That's,
Mm,
what I want to be working with.
mm.
I am the fifth child out of seven children
Wow.
from my family of origin. Um,
Mm.
and I think being the fifth child, I loved growing up in a large family. And as an adult, I continued to unpack that childhood. And there's not always room for every child to express every feeling. Uh,
Mm,
so I think I held a lot of what I was feeling growing up and into my adulthood.
mm,
Um, and only through really slowing down and allowing myself to move through my emotions and a lot of breaking barriers to allow
mm.
myself to emote.
Yeah.
Um, allowed me then to feel like, oh, this is very much the direction I want to move in, in career wise. Yeah, to be able to help people through that process, uh,
Mm.
identifying what they're feeling, and then kind of the choice of expression that we have.
Mm. Because and I love when we were talking earlier, that was one of the things. You have like three steps. What do you say? Like slow down, stop.
Mm,
How did you word it? Do you
yeah,
remember?
slow down, listen, feel.
Yeah. Okay. Slow down, listen, feel. Yeah. And I love how you worded that. Let's start there because slowing down is impossible for some people. And what
Yeah.
I have learned in my journey, like you, is it's very easy not to feel our emotions when we are always moving. And that's
Mm,
one of the reasons that we always move, because when we slow down, when we don't have the TV going, on our phone, listening to music, chatting with a friend, then we're really faced with ourselves. And if we don't do that often, we we can get a little afraid of slowing down. Um, so let's start there. I'm curious
yeah.
what your journey has been in that, and even like how you help clients begin that journey, because for me, I know that it was really fucking uncomfortable to, and it was a journey. Like it took me, not that I'm even there, right? Like we're never there, we never arrive, but it took me a long time to be okay with slowing down. So what has your journey with that been, and how do you work through that with clients?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the slowing down part for me is actually quite easy. And
Mm.
lucky in that.
Wow, I love that.
One of the things that my wife and I joke about is I'll be like, I'm slow. And I don't mean that intellectually, right?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just,
yeah.
I have a slow um, vibration, right? Like
Yeah.
every earth.
Mm-hmm.
Wife is, she's fast. Like she's just comes up with ideas and she's creating and and so when we come together and our vibrations are, in sync, it's very good.
Mm.
Yeah, it's been, so for me, slowing down is yeah, it's more easy. I think it's about, turning off, putting your phone on silent, moving it away.
Yeah.
Yeah, turning off all the external stimuli so that you can actually
Mm-hmm.
create safety around going inside, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brought up,
Mm-hmm.
that there's this fear about slowing down, and there is, because our society doesn't really slow down, right?
No.
It's 24/7, move, move, move,
No.
move, move. And anything new is exciting, and a part
Mm.
of excitement is fear of the unknown, what's going
Mm.
to happen. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so really, slowing down requires safety first.
Mm-hmm.
So with
Yeah.
my clients, that looks like, whether it's in person in my office or over Zoom, it's, do you feel safe right now in the environment that you're in? If not,
Mm.
allow for more safety. What's going to make you feel more comfortable? It's kind of
Mm.
like, if you're jumping off of a cliff, you want to make sure that you have, your um,
Parachute.
thank you.
You
You
have
want to
your
make sure you got the
stuff.
parachute.
Got everything that you need so you
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
fall.
yeah.
I love that. That's beautiful. I think for sure that's what I learned is the creating safety and asking yourself. That's one of the most powerful questions. A lot of times I'm a very logical person. I'm like, give me the list, give me the numbered out, obviously type A personality. Like tell me everything that I need to do, how to slow down.
Mm,
And that was one of the most beneficial things that I experienced was literally just sitting and asking myself, what do I need in this moment? And I love how you worded it. What do I need in this moment to feel safe or feel more safe? And truly, the answers will come. You might grapple a little bit, um, but truly the answers will come to you, whether it's like something simple like I just want a cup of tea, I want a blanket right now, I feel like I need something fuzzy, I need to wrap it around me. Sometimes we have these things, right? Like for me, I know that I do this, like I play with my rings. I wear
mm,
a lot of rings and I will like flick them on and off my finger, and that just sometimes it's just like an unconscious thing, sometimes it is a safety thing, right? Like it just helps me feel safe. There's so many things that can help you feel safe in the moment. But literally just asking yourself that and asking yourself it over and over in different situations.
right.
I
I
think there's a
always
lot of
also
power.
for that slow response as well.
Mm,
First, think in your head of what brings safety to you. And then
yeah.
as the question really sinks in, what brings me safety, then your body might also have, it's,
Mm,
so this position, I want to be on my yoga mat. I want to be on a meditation pillow. I need to be laying down on the couch right now, right?
mm-hmm.
Allowing for space for the question to sink in as well.
Mm. Is that getting us into the second step of listen, or does listen mean something else?
Um, yes.
Both. Okay.
Uh, yeah, listening is this part of listening is not active, right?
Okay.
It's kind of just the space, right? It's not
Mm.
actively listening where you're like, I'm here for it, right? It's
Mhm.
very much just be, right? It's
Mm.
stillness, right? Listening, what happens, right? What's going to come up right now, right? And being non-judgmental with that listening, right?
Yeah.
That whatever comes up is meant to be coming up right now. It makes me think right now of, I'm kind of part of where I'm moving into with my practice is also into plant medicine and leading those type
Mm.
of journeys. Uh,
Mm.
and so much of what I knew about plant medicine, from like college, it's like, oh,
Mhm.
you might have a bad trip, right?
Yep. Yep.
And fears like, I don't want to have a bad trip, right? I want to
Yeah.
be excited. I want things to be fun and learn new things. But
Yep.
um, and just from my own experiences and my own learnings, it's kind of that non-judgmental place that you find within yourself, that whatever is coming up is meant to be coming up right now.
Mm.
What is the teaching?
Yeah.
But before even getting to that point, it's just, oh, this is what is, and I'm listening to it.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Almost. I love that. Not actively. It's a very passive.
Hmm.
When I think of what you're saying, have you read The Untethered Soul,
Hmm.
the book?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That was one of the most beautiful visuals, is like when he's talking about self. And I think The Untethered Soul is like very much aligned with IFS. I assume
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, right? Like parts work. So
Yeah.
when we're talking about the self, it's like always, if you can't see me, I'm like holding my hand behind my other hand. It's like the self is always behind, and it's just witnessing
Yeah.
what is just witnessing what is, and like what's coming up. And if you're talking in terms of IFS, like we're witnessing like our parts, but witnessing our emotions, witnessing what we're noticing, and the self is just kind of there without analyzing it, which
Mm.
again, we don't practice in society. We are always listening to respond. We are always, maybe not always, but a lot of the time, we're analyzing what other people are saying. We're analyzing like our world around us. So how often do we just slow down and then listen?
Right.
That's practice. That's like, that's commitment, I think.
Yeah. Well, a lot of this is, muscle, right?
Mm,
How to do it. You're learning this tool, and then the more you practice it, it becomes a stronger muscle. And we
yeah.
know about brains that they're plastic, right? We
Yeah.
can learn new ways of thinking, and
Mm-hmm.
it can be incredibly hard when you have created a pathway
Yeah.
that's really ingrained in your brain, and your brain also takes the path of least resistance, so it's going to
Yeah.
keep taking that path until you start kind of using your hatchet to create a new pathway
Yeah.
that you want. And then it takes a lot of work, especially in the beginning, and consciousness, but
Mm-hmm.
the payout is, it's just incredible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's go to step three, because then I want to start talking about, I love that you brought that up. Um, but let's go to the third one first. So it's slow down, listen, feel.
Hmm.
What does feel entail? I
Yeah.
assume we
So
have an idea, but
so feel is going to be more of the active listening, right?
okay.
So first it was, everything that's coming through, you're just bearing witness to.
Mm-hmm.
And then feeling is more of the identifying what it is, right? And how
Yeah.
and why it is in you, right? What that
Hmm.
energy is wanting from you or with you, and what are you processing with it? Um,
Hmm.
so feeling is active listening to what your body and mind are experiencing, right? And that's where you put more of you into it, right?
Okay.
And
Hmm.
then from feeling, then you get to choose um,
Hmm.
how to express it, right?
Hmm.
Um,
I love
and that's the fun part, right? And the
that.
most difficult,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Wow. Okay. So I like this foundation that we're laying. So let's get into choosing how to feel it, choosing how to express it. One thing that we were really having a conversation about before we hit record was conditioning of from society, and a lot of how we were raised. We were raised different, you and I, because I mean, obviously different families, right? But just being male, female, like females, I think, have been given a lot of permission, although it's different because we still have a lot of judgment around that. Like if we do express, then we're overly emotional, and like we're too emotional and we're just unstable. That's the conditioning that I've gotten as a woman. But as a man, you are sharing, there's a lot of conditioning around not expressing at all. And so that's something I know that you work with your clients about, and that's something really important to you. Um, so how do we, talking about neuroplasticity, talking about like recreating these conditionings in our brain, because a lot of it even is unconscious, right? Like a lot of it we don't even realize that, oh, that's because something happened to me in the past, or that's because like I was raised being told like boys don't cry. How do we begin to form these new neural pathways?
Yeah. It brings up a conversation my wife and I were having the other day.
Mm.
And she asked me, she said, do you think everyone should go to therapy? And maybe I'm biased, but yes, absolutely.
Maybe. Yeah.
And not because everybody has these big issues in their lives, or because they had the most terrible childhoods, or because they have
Mm.
big T trauma, little T trauma, whatever it is, right? Not because of that. I think everyone should go to therapy to tell their story and have it
Mm.
land on somebody else's ears, who can then, respond with questions that maybe dig in a different direction than
Mm.
individually.
Mm.
Um, and so I bring that up because um, I think with the, feminine, masculine, in terms of what we're allowed to feel and how we're allowed to express, sometimes just telling our story
Mm.
allows us to create a new way of thinking about what we've experienced and
Mm.
why, right? So when we start to think about, for a man, it's much more allowed to express anger rather than
Mm.
sadness, right? Or
Yeah.
sadness needs to be expressed through anger.
Yep.
Um, so if you're, feel like you're quite an angry person, right? It's okay, well, if I'm reflecting my story back on myself, is it really sadness, right? Is it
Mm.
fear that I'm experiencing? But I'm expressing anger because that's a safer expression for a man. Uh,
Mm.
and then I think, if you go through that process of slowing down, uh,
Mm.
listening and feeling, then you're going to be more honest with your life experiences, right? And then
Mm.
changing and morphing how you express what you're feeling as you move forward with your life.
Wow. I love that you're bringing up anger because that's so relevant in my life, actually. So I went through a training in somatic breathwork back in December, and all of my sessions, and I've been doing breathwork before the training, and all of my expressions through a breathwork session had been tears, mostly like crying, expressing through tears. And when I went to my training, we did a breathwork session, and there were like women that were screaming and yelling and like really expressing anger. And I sat with that for a while, and after the training, because there was something in me that said like I want to be able to express that way, and there's
Mm,
some resistance towards that. So I'm like digging into like why am I resistant to expressing like through anger, like yelling, right? Like specifically yelling. And the first answer is like, well, I'm just not an angry person, like, which generally I'm not. However, let's be frank with ourselves. We all experience all emotions. We all experience frustration. We all experience anger. And like you kind of just shared, through continuing, for me, a big way to express like a big tool that I have to express emotions for me that works for me is breath work. And I'm not saying it's the only tool, but for me, that's what I have found is one of the most powerful tools that I have in my toolbox. And so through these breathwork sessions, I slowly, like, I'm a waiter. I wade in. I don't jump into things. I've noticed that about myself. So like I slowly would just like make vocalizations, and then I slowly would like yell a little bit, and I did it in sessions that I guided myself, which tend to be not quite as like emotive, but it was safe for me because nobody else, no, I wasn't asking anyone else to witness me in my anger because that didn't feel safe at the time. And then I had one of my friends who went through the training with me, and he's incredible, and like we've co-created a level of safety like you would with your therapist, which again, I agree with your wife and you, everyone should go to therapy
Yeah.
because you develop this foundation of safety. And I found myself like yelling in one of my breathwork sessions. And then I did another breathwork session a couple weeks later with another really good friend, also felt very safe with her, and expressing that anger and that frustration. And it just being so freeing for me to express that way. And you bringing that up is just reminding me, like, yeah, women are not really invited, right? We're not really invited to express anger. And so men, it's the opposite. Men are not really invited to express sadness. So I want to hear your perspective, because breath work is a beautiful tool for me, therapy, beautiful tool for you. You can also share any other tools that you have. It doesn't have to be therapy, but I want to hear um, your idea of like expressing, as a man, expressing sadness. What did you go on a journey with that, or how would you share, like, how can we begin to wade in, if you're a waiter like me, wade into expressing
Yeah.
sadness or grief or tears as a man? Like, that's huge.
Yeah. Um, hmm. I think similar to what you said, about being like, oh, I'm not an angry person.
Yeah.
I'm not a yeller, right? So what comes up for me right now is like, oh, well, I don't have so much sadness. That's not really
Right.
a part of this for me.
Yep.
It's like, oh wait, yes. Yes, it is. And that's like one of the blocks, right? Which is like, oh, defend against the feeling.
Right.
Um, and then when you wait a moment, right, slow down,
Mm.
feel, right, then it's, oh yeah, that is there.
Hmm.
um and for me, it goes back to my childhood, what I'm allowed to feel, how much expression there is in the capacity of the entire home, right?
Mm.
So I guess my journey in this has been, with any emotion, right, it's more the feeling of taking up space,
Hmm.
right? So allowing myself to do that, right? And I think
Wow.
that's been, a particularly beautiful journey,
Mm.
and working with my wife in that sense as well, because as in a partnership, both parties are meant to take up space, right? We're meant to
Mm.
both be there together. And you know, if one of the partners is not taking up space, then there's a lack of partner,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
allowing yourself to, yeah, for myself, right? Allowing me to take up space
Mm.
in the environments that I inhabit has been, a process of self-love and self-compassion,
Mm,
and trust, right? Trusting other people that I'm allowed to take up space. And then, of course, trusting myself that
mm.
I desire to take up space because I'm here, because I'm alive, because I have
Yeah,
expression of my emotion.
yeah.
Um, and I think that, that process and that journey has been a roller coaster.
Mm.
And I think a lot of the openings were through plant medicine,
Okay.
different journeys that I've been on in that area, and also deep friendships
Mm.
that I've cultivated over the years, both with my siblings who I'm very close with,
Mm.
and also friends that I've had throughout life, and also more recent friends. Um,
Mhm.
really just really incredible human beings that I'm like so blessed to have such strong and beautiful relationships with, uh,
Mm.
that have really kind of pushed against my defenses in a very loving way to be like, hey, like we want more of you. Like you're
Mm.
invited here,
Wow.
come on, like let's go. And sometimes that push, I think, especially for me, as I said, being a slow person, right? I wade in, right? Where it's like, I toe in first.
Yep,
Let me
yep, yep.
just actually make sure that what you're saying is true, that
Yes.
you want me here. And what happens if I express too much? Then what?
Yeah.
Right? So that trust factor of like, I trust that if I'm coming up against one of your boundaries, that you'll tell me, right? Or if
Mm.
you're up to capacity, that you'll communicate that with me, because that is the bond, that is the safety.
Yeah. Wow.
So yeah, I think that may have been a long-winded answer, but that's been,
No.
and I think kind of paralleling my own journey with my clients,
Mhm.
uh, not not as like a frame, like this is how it's done, but really allowing for my clients to kind of feel wherever they are right now, right? And I
Yeah.
think this is getting into a little bit of the difference between psychotherapy and life coaching, right? Is
Yeah. Okay.
right now, in their ability to express or desire to express, and their knowing and what they're feeling, their ability to slow down, connecting that to their past,
Mhm.
right? And those experiences that really have a strong line in who we become, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then how to create those tools and cultivate them, and the muscle memory of living a more conscious, authentic, aware life, uh,
Mm.
as the moving forward point. And I think that is the process of psychotherapy. And then there's also some people who come in right in the present moment wanting to move forward, which I believe is a little bit more of the life coaching, where we're not going so far back. There
Mhm.
might be a little bit of scratching the surface,
Mhm.
is important, but it's much more forward
Forward.
thinking oriented. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I had that explained to me that therapy is much focused on looking back, going back,
Mhm.
and then coaching is much more future oriented, looking forward. And not that we don't do both in both, but it's like what is the main focus, and where, yeah, where have you been? Where are you going? And you need both. I think
Oh,
probably you need to know, what's that quote? Like you need to know where you've been if you want to know where you're going, or something like that. So again, definitely. Yeah, yeah, maybe not. Like there's probably a more eloquent way to describe that, or it's probably a more eloquent quote, but but one of the things that you said was that I just found so beautiful, was you had some really deep, beautiful friendships, your partner, that have allowed you to open up and express and explore your emotions, and really, come into your full authentic expression. Um, so that's one thing that I want to talk about, because I'm curious. it's not all about relationships, right? Like we can talk about, you can definitely put it in terms of how has your wife shown up and how have you shown up for your wife, like, but it's always like we can always elaborate or expand that into all friendships, all relationships that we have with people. Because I truly believe as we develop our capacity to show up and how we can show up for people, we're also teaching them how to show up and inviting them to, you know, settle into their authenticity. And when we give them permission, when we allow ourselves to express, when we allow ourselves to meet ourselves right where we are, then we're giving permission to another person. So whether this is in terms of a romantic relationship or a friendship, I'm curious if you can touch on that, like how can we as individuals work on ourselves to then create these spaces for our friendships and our relationships?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful question.
Mm.
Well, I think the slowing down for starters,
Mm.
to first being able to do the practice with yourself, right?
Yeah.
In relation to yourself, right? How do I
Mm.
sit down? How do I feel? How do I express, right? How do I listen? Um, and the more you do that, and you're working on that muscle within yourself, then, like you said, it's also this invitation, right? Where if you want your friendships, your romantic partnerships to deepen, right? So
Mm.
you can put out that hand, right? That invitation for, hey, let's go into the deep end, right? Or
Mm.
let's wade a little bit deeper, right?
Mm.
I am feeling this, right?
Mm.
This is how I hold this. How do you hold this, right? How is
Wow.
your experience of my experience, right? And kind of
Wow.
it can sound silly, right? And it can be awkward, right?
Mm.
That's fine. That's great. A
Mm.
lot of human experiences are super fucking awkward, right? And that's why we laugh all the time, is because we're like a little bit confused because we're all these little islands, with our own like center of the world,
Yeah.
experiencing like other people's center of the world. And it's like, oh, this is like really trippy. This is so fun. Um, and yet I want to experience your world and I want you to
Mm.
experience mine, right? And I want there to be
Yeah.
this overlap. And really it's the overlap that you're deepening, right? Because you're not
Mm.
trying to extinguish yourself or other. You want both.
Mm.
Or, if you're with a group of people, right?
Mm.
We have this natural sense of like, oh, I'm talking too much, or I'm talking too little. Um, and
Mm.
that's where we start to, kind of get into our head, and that's where a lot of anxiety can live.
Mm.
But when you have this trust and safety, right, where you can ask someone, be like, hey, when we were like talking in that group, was I too much? Because I kind of have the feeling like I was taking too much space, right?
Hmm.
Being able to hear other people's experiences of us, right,
Wow.
allows us then to feel, how we are as opposed to how we think we are, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think the human experience is beautiful and funny and awkward and deep
Yeah.
and shallow, and all of that is fine and beautiful and
Yeah.
meant to be, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, and the more we allow ourselves to take up space and experience ourselves and other, um, then the more deeply we get to be alive.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that invitation and that suggestion of just asking like what is your, that's one of my, actually one of my favorite things is to get curious and ask like my friends or people that know me well and almost have them reflect what they see of me back to me, because it's oft like I've had moments where my best friend would say something or my mom would say something about me. I was like, I had no idea that's how I was perceived.
Yeah.
because I don't always feel that way, or I don't always feel that I show up that way. So to have conversations,
Yeah.
and then you're opening the door. You're creating more safety, and you're also opening the door to dive into those emotions a little bit more
Yeah.
without judgment. I think that's like going back to even just male female expression. A lot of times what I get from my male friends or males that I've met is that they want, or they would meet a girl, right? And the girl is like, I want you to express, I want you to emote. And then they would emote or cry, let's say, and then they felt unmet in some way. Like they felt like maybe the woman felt awkward about it, or her energy shifted, or she got super uncomfortable. And I think that can go in terms of romantic relationships. It can also go in terms of friendships, like we've already said. So I love that suggestion of getting curious. And I guess that would be one of my questions, though. Like, what else for males out there, or for females? Because a lot of our audiences, we've talked about this, a lot of our audiences are females, and they're like, my husband or my partner or my guy best friend needs to listen to this. Like, how can we continue to create that level of safety within all of our relationships? Is it like the female that is responding weird, or is it the male that's responding weird? Like feels that the female is responding weird? Like what's there? What's there besides having the conversation, which I love that suggestion. I think that really is the answer, but
Well, I think, if you're asking of your partner or friend or anyone really, that you want more of them, that you want more
yeah.
expression, more emotion, um, define it, right? Define what it is
Hmm.
you're actually looking for, right? Because
Mm.
maybe you want them to communicate what they're feeling, but you're not as comfortable with holding their emotion, right?
Yeah.
Or the
Yeah.
expression of it. So maybe you want your spouse to be louder, when there's conflict, right? To be more communicative, or to cry if they're sad, or to yell if they're angry. But then, when it actually happens, it's like, oh, what? I wasn't expecting that. That's not what I asked.
Right.
And I just want you
Right.
to tell me I'm feeling angry, right?
Okay.
Uh, so I think from the individual who's wanting someone else to emote more, first, I think it's asking yourself, what do you actually want, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I think, like we talked about before this, there's part of it is the conditioning of our society
Yeah.
of what is, allowed expressions of emotion for any gender.
Yeah.
um, and our society hasn't quite caught up to our individual experiences.
Hmm.
Where, I know you brought up your stepfather, and how, in your home it was, he experienced and expressed often and
Yeah.
openly, and that was like normal and wonderful.
Right.
um and I also had the privilege of my father, my father-in-law, and my siblings and my mother, a lot of safe expression.
Hmm.
My childhood was, yeah, a little bit different, but as they've grown, also like a lot more. um
Hmm.
and So yeah, that in individual experiences maybe being different than our societal experience. So yeah, not having the same expectation of everyone knowing what it is to feel and what it is to express. So when
Hmm.
you create that safe container of, I'm wanting you to express more, and what that looks like for me is that if you're feeling angry, I want you to feel and express that anger, and trust,
Hmm.
hold it. I want to hold it for you,
Yeah.
right? Because yeah, it's a pretty lonely feeling to express what you're feeling and have the other person dropped the ball, right? And then
Yeah.
it's this fear within yourself of, I'm not going to do that again, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah, and I don't blame them. These conversations that I have, I'm like, well, I don't blame that you would then feel unsafe to express with a different person but similar situation because you weren't met with that container the first time or the first few times or whatever it is. So I think it's really about building the container, and I like your invitation to really think about what is it that you're really looking for. You're not really like, you don't really need that person to like cry. What are you looking? You're looking for them to be vulnerable. You're looking for that vulnerability, or them just to be authentic, or for them to express, just to share, communicate, right? Use the word communicate, communicate your anger, communicate your frustration, or whatever it is. And then
Yeah,
almost trusting them to express how they need to express,
exactly. And
because
I
it's going
think,
to look different.
as we're on this topic, I think also bringing up, different cultural experiences of
Mm.
emotion as well, and what is normal in one culture could be very different in another culture. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so also when you're asking a partner, maybe of a different culture, to
Hmm.
express, the expression of any one emotion could also be different.
Wow.
And that's
Yeah.
why defining it, defining what you're looking for, or what the expectation is so important, because it's also respecting the other person, right? And where they come from, and what expression of emotion means to them and looks like for them, as we
Hmm.
all continue on our own journeys of, self-exploration.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then it changes over time, right? Then we then we like, as we deepen our level of capacity, then we might start expressing in different ways. And then how can we meet our partner in that? Or how can we meet our friend in that? Like, whew, life's crazy.
Yeah.
This human experience, man, it's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for this conversation. I want to begin to wrap it up. I always like to open the floor up very wide open. Is there anything else that you feel like, I have this platform, I really need to share this? I was thinking about this podcast recording, and I wanted to make sure that I hit this or I said that. Anything like that?
Yeah, there is one thing. I had a client of mine, a few days ago. He's in college,
Mm.
uh, and he brought up, not, he said he wanted to, that more recently he wasn't feeling like himself.
Mm.
And I love talking about self because it is so incredibly multifaceted.
Yeah.
Uh, and really what we got to, and I think this is just such an important point, as we're all, kind of moving in life on this like upward spiral, of time, is that, um, I, I asked him, I said, well, what self are you looking for? You know, what's
Mm.
feel? And he was like, well, how I felt back then, right? How I felt
Yeah.
a year ago, right? That self. And I told him, that self is gone. It's not
Wow.
there anymore, right? And the way that you felt yourself back then is not the same way that you're going to feel self now, right? Or feel self in the future. Um, so I think, as I have this platform, I think it's a lot of letting go
Yeah.
of who we think we are,
Mm.
and more importantly, feeling and experiencing who we are right now, without the expectation of the future, or the desires or expressions of the past.
Hmm. And what do you get from that when you let go? What do you think? Say it
You get to move
again.
slowly. You get to slow down and feel,
Wow.
and you get to be more you, right? It's the same as connecting with your breath, right? You have the inhale, and then you have that point of, you know, kind of that switch over into the exhale. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where the self is, right? It's neither the inhale or the exhale. It's right there. It's that point that you can't quite touch because it's always in movement. And so are we.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I too was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I've had multiple conversations with clients and friends and of um, looking back, right? Looking back and feeling like, man, if I could just be that person, like if I was so motivated then, or I was so happy then, I was so committed then, I was so whatever, fill in the blank. Um, and that desire to go back is huge for a lot of people. I can't honestly say that I spend a lot of time there. I've known plenty of people, and I think some of us live there, some of us don't. I always explain, like, my hypothesis is that most of us either live in the future or the past. And I live in the future. I don't live in the past. But I've met, like, one of my exes was definitely like a past dweller. And the invitation that you just gave to let go of both, right? Let go of where I want to be, where, like, that once I accomplish this, I will be happy, and let go of I was so happy in the past and I just want to get back to that person. Neither of those people exist right now. Neither of them.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
so how can we let go of that, and
Mhm.
letting go by slowing down, by being present, by just being in the moment. um I think there's a lot of freedom in that. I think that we, like, get very shackled, right, either forward or backward, and there's a lot of freedom in just being in the moment.
Yeah, human being.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. We say so much of the same stuff. I love this. All right. Let's talk about human design. My favorite part. No, all of these, all of my podcast episodes are my favorite part. So tell me, first of all, tell me what you know, because you know a little bit. So what is it that you know of human design?
Yeah, I think basically in terms of myself, I know that it's something about invitations, I believe.
Yeah.
But besides, that's about it.
Okay, I love that. Yes. So you are a projector. Every human design type, we have 5 human design types, energy types they're called, and everyone has a specific, what is it called? I'm blanking, but, like, it's all of them are wait for, except for manifestors. Manifestors are the only ones that don't have to wait. But yours as a projector is, your strategy, that's what it's called, is being invited. So wait for an invitation, which I'm trying
Like
to
when you
think if I've Huh? Yes, exactly. Exactly. So actually, Jason, which I was mentioning this podcast episode, it was my second podcast episode, Jason Melvin. If you go back a little bit, scroll down, Jason is a projector, and we had a conversation about being invited. So anyone listening, or you, of course, you can go back and listen to that. We had a conversation around the strategy. And I'm trying, now that I've done quite a few podcast episodes, I'm trying to expand what I'm talking about. So, one thing that I wanted to talk about, because I don't meet a lot of people with the G center authority, I want to talk about that. So everyone has an authority, and that simply means how we make decisions, how we go about our decision making process. And me being a sacral authority, human design is also roughly influenced by the chakra system. So if you look at, like, a human design chart, there's a few extra centers, but, like, you have basically centers running all the way down your chart. So sacral authority kind of makes sense. You think about your sacral center, that's big on, like, following my intuition, following my gut. I typically, as a sacral authority, would have an initial yes or no response to something. Your authority is also called the sounding board authority, or sounding board intuition. And I've only met maybe two or three other people that have this. Not that it's like a super uncommon one. I just haven't personally met a lot of them. And one of I just find it so interesting. So I want to hear your reflection on this, but a sounding board intuition or authority, one of the biggest things there with your decision making is, I mean, think of a sounding board, it's kind of self-explanatory, is you vocalizing and you having conversations around what decision you want to make. So it could be a big decision like where to move, right? Or it could just be a very small decision about what to have for dinner, or what activities should we do this weekend. And having the sounding board intuition, making that decision, it's really important to have conversations, and not to have conversations to hear the other person's perspective or input, but because as you are speaking out loud, you're listening to your voice, yourself, and you're like kind of if you think of like a verbal outward processor, that's what I'm thinking of right now, is as you're speaking out loud, you're coming to your conclusion there.
Hmm.
So I want to hear your connections there, because then I have a few that I'm questioning about you in the little bit that I know about you. So what kind of resonates there? What doesn't resonate there?
So it doesn't resonate.
No.
No. Um, well, it doesn't resonate to me. I'm sure it would resonate to my wife. Where she, well, I think I don't, I'm not, I don't ask many people for, when I'm making big life decisions. I'm very much
Yeah.
um, in myself with that. And I have
Mm-hmm.
lots of conversations with myself.
Mm.
And oftentimes, people around me will go, talk more. I want to hear more from you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also the invitation piece where, I'm definitely feeling safer to, bring up, oh, this is an experience I'm going through. This is a decision I'm, trying to make right now.
Okay.
What do you think? And then, yeah, like you just said, as I'm speaking, my decision making or my options, then things start to settle within myself of, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is the direction. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so no and yes.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, and I love that. And I think that's why it's really important to know it's not to get the other person's
Yeah.
opinion necessarily, but that's difficult too. So like that's what makes me curious about this specific authority, because we've already talked about this. We don't really listen to listen as a society. We listen to respond. So for you, one of the most cool things I heard Jay Shetty share is like him and his wife have this thing that she'll come up and she'll be like, I have something to talk to you about. And he'll say, okay, do you want me to listen, or do you want me to listen to respond? Or like he worded it differently. Like, do you want me to listen to give you advice, or do you want me to listen just to hold space? And I wonder if that would be beneficial for you, or maybe you already do this, but like when you're going to process a decision, like I just want you to listen just to listen, and I don't want you to respond, because I'm not asking for your input. I'm
Yeah.
asking you because I need to process this out loud, and I don't want to, like, I've already had that conversation in my head. Now I want
Yeah.
to have it out in the world.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Not something I've done so much of yet, but I love
Yeah.
that tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
especially
playing
when
around with it.
make the other person know, like, hey, this is what this is my expectation of you right now. If you're open to it, right?
Yeah.
Just listen. Or yes, I'm open to a response or, something that comes up against maybe the decision that I feel like I want to make. But I'm trusting
Mm-hmm.
enough to hold this, right? In whichever
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I'm a big person. Like I don't share all of my ideas with everyone, and I'm not like I don't want to blurt everything out, because I want to make my own decision myself. I don't always want everyone else's input. So and then right, we bring in you being a projector and you noting it's important for you to get the invitation. So to even have that conversation with your wife and maybe like a couple other people of um, asking them to ask you, right? Asking them to give you the invitation of like, hey, do you want me to listen to respond, or do you want me just to listen to you right now?
Yeah.
Because
I
the
have a
invitation is huge for people,
yeah,
projectors.
I have a good friend who reached out last week, and he was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, I know about you that if you're going through something, you're not going to call and ask to
Uh-huh.
talk. So I'm calling right now um, to talk about what you are going through. I want to know what you're
Wow.
experiencing right now, and I'm just here for it."
Wow.
It's like, oh yeah, that's a great invitation for me to just talk about what, you know, about life.
Yeah.
And getting those type of invitations are, yeah, really healing for me. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Also a great muscle that I'm continuing to work on and also me reaching out to the people that I know,
Right.
have capacity and can hold space for my experiences and my decision making.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, also how it's also fluid and
Right. Because it's not always about like we think a lot of when we learn about projectors, it's like, oh, I just have to wait. It's that word wait that really messes me up, and I think ties other people up too, because it's not like we're waiting, and it's not like you have to get like an invitation like, hey, like hold hand holding, I guess, like that friend, great friend, that's a beautiful invitation. But you just brought up a really great example of a different form of invitation of you reaching out. So you're initiating, you can initiate as a projector, you're initiating, but you're almost like you're kind of pulsing the water, like, do I have this invitation from you? Do you have capacity right now? That's one of the questions that my friend and I ask each other, and we're not even projectors, but well, she'll literally call me and she'll be like, do you have capacity right now? I have some shit
love
going
that.
on. Do you
That's
have
great.
capacity? And she and I have like full authority to be like, honestly, I really don't. I'm so sorry. I can hold space for you in a little bit, but I don't. Or yes, absolutely, go right ahead. Like all the capacity in the world right now. Like that's also an invitation. Is check. You can still check in and you can still initiate as a projector. It's just a different. They're just different energies. They're just different forms of invitations, in
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
opinion.
Like,
Yeah. I love
yeah.
that. Well, that's a little bit about human design. That's like I have so much to say, but we can't talk about human design for I can talk about human design forever actually,
Absolutely.
but I will not take up all of the time in the world. So, it's interesting, like if you ever get curious about it, there's so many different podcasts. There's so many different people that you can follow on Instagram. And just like we're talking about tools like plant medicine, like therapy, like breath work, human design to me is just another tool to explore ourselves.
Yeah.
That's all it is. And there's going to be parts of it that you resonate with. There's going to be parts that you don't. And where you have that resistance, looking at that too. Like maybe it's, yeah, I really don't feel like it is me. Or maybe it's like, I haven't been embracing this part of me. Or maybe it's, I don't even fully understand yet because I don't know anything about, I don't know a
Yes.
lot about human design. Like there's so many facets of it, but it's simply just another tool in my toolbox that I found that I love and that I like to share with people, but it doesn't mean it's going to resonate with everyone either.
Totally.
Oh, anyway, thank you, Avi. This was such a fun conversation. Please share where people can find you, where people can follow up with you. Where do you hang out?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, my social media is Zadaka underscore psychotherapy. And then of course there's also my website, zadakapsychotherapy.com. And then yeah, I hang out in Boulder, Colorado with my two boys and my wife and our dog. and our beautiful community here and the beautiful
Yeah.
people of Boulder.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so
Thank you.
Hannah,
I
thank
love
you
it.
so much for having me on your
Oh,
podcast.
yeah.
The work that you do is just beautiful and so incredibly needed. And you really, first of all, just held the podcast really well, and I loved all of your questions.
Oh,
And also just based on, your Instagram and what you show in that sphere, um, I want to join your breathwork courses and your yoga classes just because,
yeah.
or I think it's yoga, right? Everyone's on yoga
Meditation.
meditation.
Yeah.
Just from those reels, like you can really tell how well you hold
Thank
um,
you.
the room, which
Mm.
is really a beautiful gift. Um,
Wow.
yeah, thank you again. This was so
Thank
fun.
you. Thank you. And likewise, everything. I love all of the content. Please go follow him because you share beautiful content and have so many conversations that are so important to have, and introduce these topics that are really important to just settle into and explore. So thank you. Thank you for coming. This is such a fun episode.
Well, thanks, Anna.